Well, fresh analysis reveals half of Commonwealth Rental Assistance recipients remain under rental stress. It is spurring renewed calls to boost the payment as rental markets around Australia maintain record low vacancy rates. Joining us now is Everybody's Home National Spokesperson, Maiy Azize. Maiy, appreciate your time. Thank you. Just set the scene for us here. What is the current rental assistance payment? How high do you think it needs to go? What needs to change here?
So right now, the highest rate of rent assistance that a person can get if they're single is about $150 a week. And if you're a share house, it's about $100 a week. But the issue with that is that the people who get Commonwealth Rent Assistance are already on such low incomes that what it means is that a lot of rentals are still really unaffordable for them. So for a person on Youth Allowance, they'd need to find a rental that's less than about $100 a week. So try finding a rental or a share house that's under $100 a week in this market. If you're a person on JobSeeker, you'd be looking at about $125 a week, all the way up to about $160 a week if you're on the age pension. So these are really small numbers in a rental market that's really overheating. And as you say, about half of everyone who gets rent assistance is still in rental stress afterwards.
So, Maiy, when we look at the sort of housing umbrella that the government is dealing with, when you look at the billions of dollars the government spends on rental assistance compared with, say, social housing and also homelessness services, what's the breakdown? Where does most of the money largely go?
So about $1.6 billion at the moment is spent on social housing and homelessness services bundled up together. It's part of one Commonwealth agreement. And $4.9 billion is spent on rent assistance. So rent assistance costs about 3 times as much at the moment as social housing. That's really interesting because when rent assistance was first introduced, the idea was that it was supposed to save the government money on social housing. But what we're seeing now is that the social housing shortfall is just so huge. We've got a shortfall of 500,000 social homes across the country. And the private rental market is just so unaffordable. Rents have soared to the point where the payment just isn't cutting it and the bill is growing and growing.
And which demographics are struggling the most? Is it that younger cohort that we're mainly talking about here?
Well, the problem with younger people on this payment is that they're on the lowest incomes. So the average person we were just speaking about before who gets rent assistance, about 50% of them are still in rental stress after they get the payment. For a young person, it's about 2 in 3. 2 in 3 people are still in rental stress if they're under the age of 24 when they get this payment, just because their payment rates are so much lower, their incomes are so much lower, and they find it a lot tougher to compete in the job market. The really tough thing, though, is that a lot of young people aren't even eligible for rent assistance in the first place. So only about 1 in 10 young people who's looking for work on Youth Allowance is actually eligible for rent assistance. So the people who do get it are still in rental stress, and then 9 out of 10 people who are on Youth Allowance can't get any help at all.
And is it the big cities that are the worst in terms of the most people under that sort of rental stress? I mean, when you look at how tight the rental market is more broadly, are there certain places that are worse than others?
Yeah, the cities for a long time were Australia's real driver of housing and rental stress across the country, and regional areas and towns were sort of seen as offering a bit of a reprieve. What we're seeing, or what we've seen over the last few years since COVID struck, is actually just that towns have become a lot more expensive. A lot of locals are being priced out of regional areas, and those areas are really catching up. So we know that about 1 in 3 people who get Commonwealth Rent Assistance payments are actually living in regional and rural areas.
Maiy Azize, really appreciate you joining us to take us through some of those issues. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.